Hey guys, Frosty Knives here, back with another EU book review in chronological order. And today we will be reviewing Matthew Stover's Mace Windu centric war novel, Shatterpoint. Now, Shatterpoint, when they started doing the Clone Wars multimedia project, Shatterpoint was the first novel that was published in the Clone Wars book series. So this novel was published in 2003, and it clocks in at 419 pages. This copy also comes with a special introductory prologue by George Lucas explaining the Clone Wars in a 2-page introduction. And it also includes a short 8-page short story that Matthew Stover wrote called Equipment, about some clone troopers and a battle at Haruun Kal that they were involved in. So it was a very short story that we probably won't cover in this review. But for this story, this is all about Mace Windu. This is all about Mace Windu and some backstory on Mace Windu and Mace Windu's home planet. So about 2 months into the Clone Wars, the Jedi Council learns that Mace's home planet of Haruun Kal is being controlled by the Separatists. So they decide to send his former Padawan, Jedi Master Depa Billaba, over to Haruun Kal to investigate, to see if she can sort of foment a rebellion, to see if she can essentially get the Separatists kicked off Haruun Kal. A short while after that happens, a couple months after that happens, they lose contact with Depa. And about 4 months after they send her, they get a message back from Haruun Kal. And in the message, it basically states that there's a rogue Jedi who is murdering civilians and who is doing atrocious things, and there needs to be something. It indicates that there's a rogue Jedi that is killing civilians, and that something needs to be done about that. So they're afraid that rogue Jedi is Depa, and that she has somehow gone over to the dark side, and they don't know why or how that would have happened. So Mace decides, since it is his home planet, and this is his former Padawan, that he's going to go alone to Haruun Kal to investigate to see what is going on. So this story takes place about 6 months after the beginning of the Clone Wars. Mace is he's an outsider basically to his home world. He was taken from Haruun Kal when he was about 6 months old by some Jedi anthropologists that were studying the planet. They found that he had some Force abilities, and they took him to the Jedi Council on Coruscant. So he's essentially an outsider to his own world. He doesn't really know his planet, so we're learning about his planet right alongside with him. The story is told in 2 formats. There's the third person story part of it, but there's also entries from Mace's private journal. So interspersed between the stories of what's going on, we get diary entries from Mace. We get to hear about what Mace is thinking, what he's afraid of, what's going on in his head. This whole book really takes place from Mace Windu's perspective, both through his viewpoint of the action going on and the thoughts through his diary in his head. And so it cuts in between those 2 segments. So you get a lot of first-person information, then you get a lot of third-person information. Haruun Kal is basically in somewhat inhospitable planet. It's a jungle planet. There's a lot of toxic gases going on. There's a lot of things on the planet that can kill you. A lot of poisonous plants and predators and dangerous things going on, and including the natives. And there are 2 sets of natives on Haruun Kal. There is the Koronai, which is the indigenous folk, the people that are from the planet. They call themselves the Koronai. They're from the Coronal Highlands, one of the only land masses on the planet that you could actually live on. And then there's the Balawai. And the Balawai is their name for outsiders who have come to the planet to prospect, to gather minerals and plant life and other resources that they can then turn around and sell. And these two sets of population, these two populations have been involved in a decades-long war called the Summertime War. And they call it the Summertime War because it literally is a war that only happens in the summer. So during the summer, these two groups of people fight each other. And then when it's not summer anymore, they go back to their respective areas and then make it through the winter. And then next summer, they come back and do it all over again. And they've been doing that for decades. And you find out that the separatists have been giving the Balawai ships and weaponry. They've been sort of tipping the balance of power in the Balawai's favor. And they're hoping that the Balawai would basically commit genocide and wipe out the Koronai on the planet. So that the separatists, they're trying to foment chaos, and they're trying to take resources, and they're trying to basically do what separatists do in the Clone Wars. Mace eventually finds out that Depa, that his Padawan, has somehow gotten involved in all of this. And that she has indeed sort of, being in this scenario, being in this war-torn environment, fighting in someone else's war, it really has done a number on her as a Jedi and as a person. And she sort of lost her way, and she's essentially, we watch her sort of slipping to the dark side. We see her sort of what the war does to her psyche, and how it sort of ravages her psyche, and what it does to her, because she is a Jedi, and Jedi are guardians of peace, and they're meant to preserve life. But instead, they're committing life. They're committing death. They're not saving anybody. So that's antithetical to what Jedi do. So it's really causing her physical and mental issues that Mace Windu also is going through the longer he stays on this planet. There's something that Depa said in the book, which was, we can win this war. Meaning the Summertime War, and also meaning the Clone War. We as Jedi, we can win this war. But if we win this war, in order to win this war, we can no longer be Jedi. We have to be something else. We have to be something darker. We have to be something other than what we are. We can't be guardians of peace and preservers of life. We have to be bringers of death. We have to be something that we're not. And that's sort of the ethical conundrum and that they find themselves in, all this what the war is doing to the Jedi. So this is really a war story. It is dark. It is gritty. It is extremely violent. It's the second most violent book I think that we've read so far. First one being Mall Lockdown. That was very dark and gritty and violent because it took place at a prison. This one is very dark and gritty and violent because you're really in the trenches of war. And what does it mean to fight a war? What does it mean to fight a war if you're a Jedi? What does it mean to fight a war that's not yours? Because the Summertime War is not Depa's war. The Clone Wars is really not the Jedi's war, but these are wars that have been foisted upon them. And what that does to you as a person, how that changes your mentality, how that changes your perspective on life, how that changes your belief system, how that essentially sort of destroys you as a Jedi, because all the things that you need to do to win wars, to win battles, to send people to their death on such a grand scale, that's opposite of what it means to be a Jedi. So they're wrestling with that. The big baddie of the book is Kar Vaster. He's the head of the Koronai, and he essentially wants to wipe out the Balawai. They both want to wipe each other out. They're not satisfied with winning the war. They both want to wipe the other population out completely. They both want to commit genocide on each other. So they're not happy to just win the war. They don't want to just win it. They want to wipe these people out of existence. It was a very, it's a very well described novel. We get to read a lot about his homeworld, the planet. We get to read about a lot about Haruun Kal. Everyone on Haruun Kal is sort of force sensitive. They're all force sensitive. They can use the force in some manner, except they don't call it the force. They call it Pelikotin, the law of the jungle, the darkness of the force of the jungle. You eventually find out that the reason that they can use the force is because sometime in the past, a Jedi ship crashed on Haruun Kal, and the survivors of that Jedi ship essentially lived there. And the Koronai and the Koronai, not the Balawai because they're from outside the planet, but the Koronai are the descendants of these Jedi who have crashed. That's why they can use. They're all force sensitive, but they're not trained in anything. So that's another aspect of the book is what does it look like when you can use the force like Mace Windu or Depa Billaba, and you're trained in it, versus someone who has force abilities, but they've never been trained in it. So it's raw and untapped, and they just kind of use it, and it sort of consumes them, and they don't really know. They become powerful when they don't know how to control it. So that's another theme of the story. I found the book to be very descriptive, very interesting. It's very dark. If you're not a Mace Windu fan, you may not enjoy this book as much. If you're not a fan of Mace Windu, if you're not a fan of first person, you may not enjoy this because there's a lot of that. The book is divided into three sections. The first section is Mace going to Haruun Kal to start his journey, his search for Depa. The second section is him on Haruun Kal trying to find her, and eventually he does. And then the third section is a giant battle between the Separatists and the Balawai and the Koronai and the resolution of that. So it did get a little bit confusing in the battle sequences. I did have a hard time following some of the action that was going on. I got the broad strokes of it, but there was a lot going on in this whole book. This book felt very dense for a Star Wars book, and there was a lot going on. And some of the battles were hard to find, to follow. But I was able to get sort of the broad strokes of what is going on. It was interesting to see Depa, to see her sort of slow slide into the dark side, the choices that she was making, the reasoning behind the choices she was making, what it was doing to her physically, because she was getting migraine, she was getting physical issues, what it was doing to her mentally, how she was losing her way, how she didn't consider herself a Jedi anymore. And so it was interesting to see that slow slide into the dark side for her. And it was also interesting to see Mace himself starting to slow slide into the dark side and how he had to fight against the urges that he was feeling, the jungle environment, the war environment, the things that he needed to do to win versus all of the training that the Jedi had given him. So it's a really interesting viewpoint, sort of a microcosmic viewpoint of what war does to you, what being in battle, that unending death, that unending battles, what it does to a person mentally and physically, and the toll that it takes on you, and the toll that it takes on the Jedi, and the tolls that it takes on the clones. It's very interesting to see that. I've always had a problem with Mace Windu. I call him the angry Jedi, because he never really feels like a Jedi to me. He's always the angry Jedi. And he even mentions that in this book. You know, he says, I like to fight. He likes to fight. He says, I like to fight. And he does, more so than other Jedi, I think. And there's a lot of anger in his personality, even in the movies. He just comes across as stern and angry and regimented and stubborn and stiff. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Mace Windu is played by Samuel L. Jackson. And a lot of Mace's personality and his characteristics are modeled after Samuel L. Jackson himself. And Samuel L. Jackson plays a lot of violent, angry characters in movies. So I always found Mace to be an interesting character because he never felt like a Jedi to me. He always just felt like he was this close to becoming a Sith. Like he was walking the line, you know? He's the only Jedi that has a purple lightsaber, as we all know. He's the only Jedi who created his own form of lightsaber combat. Vapid. There were 6 forms of combat before Mace rolled around, and now there's the 7th. And there's not many people who can use Vapid. As a matter of fact, there's only 3 people who have mastered that technique, because every other Jedi that has tried to master Vapid has fallen to the dark side. Because it is a lightsaber technique and a force technique that makes you tap into your inner anger, makes you use your anger as a tool. So I always found Mace to be curious, because he seems to straddle that line. He straddles that line between light and dark, and somehow, you know, he's a revered Jedi Master. They call him a diplomat, a philosopher. He's on the Jedi Council. He's a senior member of the Council. He's trained a lot of people. Yet he just always seems to be just one bad day away from being a Dark Jedi. And this was his one bad day. This was something that I think could have easily pushed him into becoming the next Dooku, or the next Sabayoth, or the next Vader. And he doesn't. He fights against that throughout the whole book. So we watch him wrestle with that. I wound up giving this a 4 on Goodreads. I do find it interesting. It's unlike any other book so far that we've read. It doesn't quite feel like a Star Wars novel. Like I said, it feels like it is a dark, gritty, violent war novel. With a lot of military battles, a lot of battle lingo, a lot of military lingo, things like that. So if that's not your cup of tea, you may not like this book. In some portions, I thought that it may have dragged a little bit. The first section was really good. It started to slow down a little bit towards the middle. And then the last part was the battle section, and I kind of got lost on some of it, but we were able to get through that. So it felt like it might be just a little too long, maybe a little too dense for a Star Wars novel. It was well written. It was very well written, and I liked the characters that were in it. I liked that we got to see Depa. I liked the character of Kar Vaster. I liked the character of Nick Rostu, who was somebody that Mace found along the way, wound up becoming someone that worked for Mace. So there were a lot of good characters in there. That was very well done. A lot of the dialogue was interesting because Mace had a lot of quippy one-liners. A lot of the one-liners that Mace had in the book felt a lot like Samuel L. Jackson one-liners from his movies. So he was very snarky in the book. He had a lot of, dark humor in the book. Again, I think Mace is modeled a lot after Sam's personality, so that's why he feels different from all the other Jedi. But overall, it was a decent book. It's not something I think that I will reread again, because it was just so sort of dense and dark and gritty and somewhat depressing. But I'm glad that now I read it. I give it a 4. We give it a 4 on Goodreads. So that is my review of Matthew Stover's Shatterpoint, the Mace Windu novel, the Angry Jedi novel. The next book that we'll be reading in our journey, Don't Fall, will be Star Wars Republic Commando 000. We're back to the Republic Commando series. So guys, I hope you enjoyed the review. Thanks for watching. Give it a subscribe. Give it a thumbs up. Share it around. Tell your friends. Tell your enemies. Tell your angry Jedi people. And until next time, I'll see you in the next video.